Starter Pokémon are arguably the most popular Pokémon in the entire franchise, so much so that I figured it was time for another video dedicated to them. This time, attempting to teach you at least one thing you didn't know about the starters, or found interesting. So, here are 20 facts about the starter Pokémon, starting with... So we all know it's now impossible to nickname a Pokémon something rude or offensive, for obvious reasons. And in Generation 5, they added a name censor, stopping Pokémon with certain words in their names to be traded online. But this censor was not perfect, as if a Pokémon already had one of these words in their names, then they still could not be traded, with one of the most famous examples being Cofagrigus. But did you know that there are some starters whose names also stop them from being traded online? Specifically, the entire Bulbasaur line and Croconaw. Now you might be wondering, what would be the words that Game Freak would want to censor online? Well, if you didn't know, words that were in other languages other than English were also censored. So for the Bulbasaur line, the name contained SAU, which is the German word for sow, meaning a female pig or swine, and Croconaw's name contained con, meaning idiot in French. Luckily, this is no longer an issue today, but just thinking of all those poor Croconaw and Bulbasaur being banned from online, truly saddening. Egg moves are both a blessing and an annoyance, allowing Pokemon to learn strong moves, but only after going through the effort of breeding it correctly onto them. And in Gen 2, one of Bulbasaur's egg moves was Charm. However, in Gold and Silver only, there wasn't any Pokemon in either of Bulbasaur's egg groups that was able to learn Charm, meaning that Bulbasaur had an attack that was completely locked off to it. This was changed in Crystal, where Bulbasaur did eventually get access to Charm, but damn, poor Bulbasaur. Couldn't be traded, and now can't even get its moves. We all know that Pikachu was Ash's first Pokemon all those years ago. However, Ash's first Pokemon was originally planned to be Clefairy, and this was changed due to Clefairy quote-unquote looking too feminine, according to the producers, changing to the more gender-neutral looking Pikachu. However, a fact that not as many of you might know is that Ash's first choice for a starter, before Pikachu was even an option, was going to be Squirtle, since that was the first starter he went for in the anime. Not only that, but we also know which starter Oak picked, or at least had on his team. In the Celebi movie, Oak's younger self, spoiler alert, sends out a Charmeleon, meaning that Charmander was most likely Oak's first Pokemon. Good to know that Oak had good taste as well. You ever hear people call Typhlosion Johto's Charizard? I mean, the Pokemon don't look alike at all. Well, apart from both of them being the fire starter, these mons are more similar than you'd expect. So similar that they both have the exact same stats. Not just the final evolutions, the entire line shares the same numbers. This isn't the case for any other starter, although it is almost for the Bulbasaur and Chikorita lines, having the same stat numbers, the only difference being their defense and special attack stats being swapped. It's always fun seeing what Pokemon used to look like before their final forms, with some of the most extreme cases being the Johto starters. Chikorita and Meganium are more or less the same, but everything else is drastically different. In fact, Cyndaquil at this time was still in the game, but originally wasn't going to be the fire starter, looking like this. He may not have even been fire type if he stayed like this. There are some other cool beta forms, especially with Torchic, Blaziken, and others, but the Gen 2 starters are definitely the most notable. While beta designs were changed before the game came out, there are still some starters that went through changes way after the beta stage. Charmander, for example, originally having a spike on its back. Not only that, but the number of fingers Charmander has seems to be pretty inconsistent. Another starter with slight visual changes was Croconaw, with its caveman-like vest swapping from one shoulder to the other. Yeah, that's it. With Charizard being arguably the most popular Pokemon ever, you'd expect it to be the most used in the anime, but that isn't really the case. In fact, Squirtle was the most used Kanto starter out of all the main characters in the anime, being used by 4 different main characters. Even more popular than Squirtle is Johto's Chikorita, being used by 6 trainers. So even though the popular starter might get the most spotlight sometimes, it doesn't mean it's the most popular among characters. Rowlet, as of now, is the only grass starter not listed as green, for obvious reasons. But it wasn't always the case. Before Chikorita was green, it used to be completely yellow. This colour scheme makes more sense with its evolution also being yellow, but the green works fine as well. One of the most notable people to own a starter Pokemon in the anime was the Frontier Brain Lucy. She doesn't use a starter in the games, or the anime at all, but she does own one in the show. So in the anime, she's maybe the first ever girl to actually show any interest in Brock. And there's a scene where she goes home to a bunch of her Pokemon, all of which have the same eyes as Brock, one of them being a Cyndaquil. And that's the reason why she likes Brock. That is pretty hilarious. It's not uncommon for a newly released Pokemon to become a meme, and a couple of the most well-known Pokemon memes are of course of starter Pokemon, with possibly the first being the famous "Do you like Mudkips?", which began on DeviantArt, believe it or not. Fast forward a few years to around when Gen 5 was announced, and we have the reveal of the Unova starters, and since their names weren't officially revealed, Snivy was given the name Smugleaf due to its smug-like appearance. Feraligatr arguably became a meme as well, or just a funny picture, one of the two. Who is the strongest starter Pokemon? Not including different forms. Well, on paper, that answer would be Swampert. Most starter Pokemon have very similar stat totals, but Swampert is the highest, with 535. Additionally, Swampert is able to deal the single strongest hit of any starter Pokemon. Wanna know how? Well, it just so happens that Dobbs has done a whole video on that, so if you do want to find out how, do check that out. But yeah, Swampert might be the strongest starter Pokemon overall. Even though Swampert might be the strongest starter on paper, it doesn't mean it's the strongest starter competitively. As of today, there have been 3 starter Pokemon that have all been banned to the Uber tier in Smogon, those starters being Blaziken, due to its combination of Speed Boost and Baton Pass, Greninja and Cinderace, for their Protean Libero abilities, turning them into whatever the type of the move they're using. Does this mean that these are the 3 strongest starters overall? Well, it depends on the format. The strongest starter in doubles would definitely be Incineroar, being possibly the most used Pokemon in official VGC tournaments ever since it got access to its hidden ability Intimidate. That is pretty impressive. Did you know that Blaziken was in the anime before Typhlosion? Kind of. As of now, Blaziken is the first starter to appear in the anime before its generation, appearing in the episode Pop Goes the Sneasel, airing in 2002 in Japan and 2003 in the US. Typhlosion didn't appear in the anime during the second generation, outside of a special that aired in 2001 in Japan, but didn't air in the US until 2006. And outside of this, Typhlosion aired during the third generation in 2003 in Japan and 2004 in the US, in the episode Gonna Rule the School. So Typhlosion technically aired first in 2001 in Japan, Blaziken aired first in America, and during the main series of the Pokemon anime. While Charizard may hold the title of most popular Pokemon, that doesn't mean it's currently the most popular. That title arguably belongs to Greninja, being the only starter to have more than 2 abilities and its own unique form, as well as being the most popular in Japan at one point. And until another starter gets its own form similar to Ash Greninja, it'll probably stay that way. As Pokemon evolve, they become even stronger, getting a good increase in their stat totals, although in some rare cases, their stats may become worse, and Incineroar is so far the only starter that follows this, becoming even slower than its pre-evolution. In fact, the Alola starters are the only trio where none of them have a speed stat of 100 or more, all being rather slow. This is so far the only trio where the fastest starter is a middle evolution, and hopefully the last. You ever looked at Piplup and Oshawott and thought that they looked similar to each other? Well, that's because they were designed by the same person, Yusuke Umara. Other Pokemon they designed was the entire Oshawott line, the Tynamo line, Greninja, Zacian and Zamazenta, as well as Kubfu and Urshifu. What a good group of Mons. Could you imagine a Pokemon generation where instead of the traditional grass, fire and water types, the starters types were different? Well, if they were to use 3 types that would work in the same way as grass, fire and water, being strong and weak against each other, those types would have to be rock, fighting and flying, since they resist and are strong against each other in the same way. Additionally, fighting, psychic and dark could also work, however it wouldn't be exactly the same, since dark is immune to psychic, but in my opinion still would work fine. One cool thing about each starter trio is that for the most part they follow some sort of theme, with some of them being more obvious than others. Kanto starters follow genetics, or in some cases the dinosaurs. The Johto starters follow ancient creatures, the Gen 3 starters being unique evolutions, not as obvious as the other trios, but there's something there. The Gen 4 starters being myths, or civilizations, the Gen 5 starters being Asian higher social classes, definitely some Asian theme in there. The Gen 6 starters being probably the most obvious, being RPG classes, with the warrior, the mage and the rogue. The Alola starters having a circus-like theme, and the Gala starters being British entertainment. Hopefully the future starters will have more, even cooler themes to follow. Now let's take a look at some starter Pokemon that aren't really starter Pokemon, if that makes any sense. The best known example of these being Pikachu and Eevee, both acting as the starter Pokemon in Yellow and the Let's Go games, but still technically not being official starter Pokemon. In terms of other games, the starters in the first Ranger game were Plusle and Minun, depending on what gender the player picked, and in the second Ranger game, the player had the choice between Pachirisu, Starly and Munchlax. An interesting trio for sure. Wanna guess what Red starter was in the manga? You'd assume it'd be one of the Kanto starters, or maybe even Pikachu. But it wasn't. It was in fact a Poliwag. How cute. Wally's starter was of course Ralts, although technically his first Pokemon was Zigzagoon since he had to borrow it to catch Ralts. In the anime, Brock's starter was confirmed to be Onix, Volkner's starter was a Pikachu, Bonnie's first Pokemon was a Dedenne, Lily's first Pokemon was an Alola Ninetales, and James's first Pokemon was a Growlithe. How nice. Now I'm wondering what some other characters' first Pokemons were. Let's see. What was Misty's first Pokemon?
You sit on a throne of lies.
These are all the starters that have a gender difference in the main series games. And no, I'm not including Pikachu and Eevee because, again, they're not technically starter Pokemon. Some differences are very noticeable, and some are not so much. But did you know that Charizard was supposed to have a gender difference? In the 4th generation, a male Charizard would look the same, however a female Charizard would only have 1 horn rather than 2. Honestly, I think they should have kept this in my opinion. Along with this, Trico was planned to have a gender difference, with the male and females having slightly different acting tails, and Typhlosion also had a gender difference, being a slight difference on its snout. Honestly, I'm all for gender differences, so hopefully they introduce more for starters in the future. And those are 20 facts about the starter Pokemon. Hopefully you learned at least one new thing, or found something interesting. I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please do leave a like, as it does help the video out, subscribe for more Pokemon videos in the future, and until next time, thank you so much for watching.